BBQs from decades past were more than just meals. They were moments of joy, community, and tradition. Grandpa's BBQs were filled with unique dishes that brought everyone together. But as time has gone on, many of these barbecue favorites have faded from our tables and memories. Today, let's take a nostalgic look back at 20 barbecue foods that Grandpa always had on the table, dishes that defined the 1930s to the 1980s but have been largely forgotten today. Number 1. Cinder roasted beef roast. Cinder roasted beef roast is a forgotten classic that many grandpas mastered back in the day. This cooking method involves slow roasting a beef cut directly over glowing embers, often using cinders from a wood or coal fire. Unlike modern roasting techniques, which use controlled ovens or gas grills, cinder roasting relies on maintaining just the right amount of heat from the embers. Grandpa would carefully arrange the hot cinders around the beef, creating a natural oven effect that allowed the meat to cook evenly from all sides. The process could take several hours, requiring patience and skill. The meat was usually a tough cut like a chuck or round roast, chosen for its ability to become tender when cooked slowly. To prepare it, Grandpa would rub the beef with a mixture of salt, black pepper, and a few simple spices he had on hand, maybe a hint of paprika or a sprinkle of garlic powder. As the beef roasted, it developed a smoky crust on the outside while remaining juicy and flavorful on the inside. The slow cooking allowed the fat to render and the connective tissues to break down, creating a rich, melt-in-your-mouth texture that modern methods often can't replicate. This technique not only made the most of available resources but also brought out the deep, natural flavors of the meat, making it a memorable centerpiece at family gatherings. Number 2. Squirrel and Rabbit BBQ. Squirrel and Rabbit BBQ was a popular dish among those who grew up in rural areas or during times when hunting provided much-needed protein for the family table. These meats, often overlooked today, were once considered delicacies in the 1930s through the 1950s, particularly in southern and Midwestern America. Grandpa would often prepare squirrel and rabbit by marinating them in a brine made of salt, sugar, and vinegar, which helped to tenderize the lean meat and remove any gamey flavor. After marinating, the meat was usually seasoned with a blend of spices like paprika, cayenne pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder to enhance its natural flavors. Cooking over a slow, wood-fired barbecue, Grandpa would ensure that the meats were tender and smoky. Squirrel, with its light, gamey flavor, and rabbit, known for its slightly sweet and tender flesh, were basted with a mixture of homemade barbecue sauce and butter to keep them moist and flavorful. These meats were often cooked until they reached a fall-off-the-bone tenderness, making them a perfect addition to a rustic barbecue meal. The tradition of squirrel and rabbit barbecue has faded over the years due to changes in hunting laws, urbanization, and shifts in meat preferences, but for many, the unique flavors and the memories of Grandpa's backyard BBQs remain unforgettable. Number 3. Campfire pork chops. Campfire pork chops were a staple in Grandpa's barbecue repertoire, particularly favored for their simplicity and deep, smoky flavor. Cooking these chops directly over an open flame added a unique, rustic taste that modern grilling can't quite match. The pork chops were usually bone-in, which helped to retain moisture during cooking. Grandpa often seasoned them with a blend of salt, black pepper, and perhaps a touch of paprika or cayenne for a hint of heat. Before placing them over the fire, the chops were sometimes marinated in a simple mix of vinegar, oil, and herbs like rosemary or thyme, which tenderized the meat and infused it with flavor. Once on the grill, the chops were seared quickly over high heat to lock in the juices, then moved to a cooler part of the fire to finish cooking slowly. This method ensured the pork remained juicy and flavorful, with a slightly charred exterior that added a delightful crunch with every bite. The process of cooking over a campfire required attention and skill to manage the heat of the flames, something Grandpa mastered with years of experience, making these pork chops a beloved memory at any outdoor gathering. Number 4. Oxtail stew with barbecue beans. Oxtail stew with barbecue beans was a hearty dish that many grandpas perfected, known for its rich flavors and comforting qualities. Oxtail, which comes from the tail of cattle, is a bony, gelatin-rich meat that becomes incredibly tender when slow-cooked. To prepare this stew, Grandpa would first sear the oxtail pieces over high heat, often directly on the grill, to lock in the juices and develop a deep, caramelized crust. This initial searing also imparted a smoky flavor that complemented the rest of the stew. The oxtail was then simmered slowly in a pot with a mix of barbecue beans, onions, garlic, tomatoes, and a medley of spices like cumin, chili powder, and smoked paprika. The beans, typically a mix of pinto and kidney beans, absorbed the flavors of the oxtail and the spices, becoming soft and creamy. This combination created a robust, savory stew with a slightly sweet undertone from the barbecue sauce. Grandpa often added a splash of apple cider vinegar or Worcestershire sauce to enhance the stew's complexity, balancing the richness of the oxtail with a tangy bite. The long, slow cooking process allowed the marrow from the bones to infuse the stew with extra depth and a silky texture, making it a dish that was both filling and full of character. Number 5. Barbecue Braunschweiger Sliders. Barbecue Braunschweiger sliders were a unique dish that brought a gourmet twist to the typical backyard barbecue. Braunschweiger, a type of liverwurst made from pork liver, is rich and creamy, offering a distinct flavor profile that set these sliders apart from more common barbecue items. Grandpa would often slice thick rounds of Braunschweiger and lightly grill them just enough to add a hint of smoky flavor without drying out the soft, spreadable texture. These slices were then placed on small, toasted slider buns, which had been brushed with a garlic butter mix for an added layer of flavor. For toppings, Grandpa might add pickled onions or a dollop of mustard to cut through the richness of the liver sausage, creating a balance of savory, tangy, and smoky flavors. Sometimes, he'd add a slice of sharp cheddar cheese to bring a creamy yet contrasting bite. The sliders were often served as appetizers or snacks at BBQs, offering a sophisticated taste that also utilized affordable ingredients. This dish was a creative way to introduce organ meats to the barbecue table, combining traditional cooking techniques with a bit of ingenuity that highlighted Grandpa's culinary skills. Number 6. Grilled Spam Kebabs. Grilled Spam Kebabs were a creative twist on the traditional barbecue, often seen in the 1950s and 1960s when convenience foods like Spam were gaining popularity. Grandpa would cut Spam into thick, bite-sized cubes, carefully threading them onto skewers alongside a colorful array of vegetables such as bell peppers, onions, and cherry tomatoes. The salty, savory flavor of Spam made it an ideal ingredient for grilling because it caramelized nicely over direct heat, creating a crispy exterior while keeping the inside moist and tender. To enhance the flavor, Grandpa might brush the skewers with a tangy pineapple glaze or a soy-based marinade, adding a sweet and salty balance that made these kebabs particularly appealing. The sugars in the glaze would create a slightly charred, sticky coating, adding depth to each bite. Sometimes, chunks of pineapple were also added to the skewers to complement the Spam saltiness, creating a sweet and savory contrast that was both simple and satisfying. These kebabs were easy to prepare and quick to cook, making them a perfect dish for feeding a crowd at family gatherings. They were a fun way to incorporate an affordable, shelf-stable protein into BBQs, turning a humble can of Spam into a nostalgic treat that reminded everyone of simpler times. Number 7. Marinated Eel Barbecue. Marinated eel barbecue was a unique and often luxurious dish that Grandpa prepared, particularly popular in regions near the coast or where freshwater eel was plentiful. To prepare marinated eel for the barbecue, Grandpa would clean and fillet the eel, removing any bones and cutting the meat into manageable pieces. The marinade typically included a mix of soy sauce, mirin, a sweet rice wine, sake, sugar, and a bit of grated ginger or garlic. This mixture not only tenderized the eel but also infused it with a rich, umami flavor that balanced the natural fattiness of the fish. After allowing the eel to soak in the marinade for several hours or even overnight, Grandpa would place the eel pieces on skewers or directly on a well-oiled grill grate. Cooking over a medium heat, he would frequently brush the eel with the marinade, creating a glaze that caramelized beautifully as it cooked. This method ensured that the eel remained moist and tender while developing a slightly crispy exterior. The grilling process imparted a smoky flavor that complemented the sweetness of the marinade, making each bite a complex mix of savory, sweet, and smoky notes. Marinated eel barbecue was a delicacy that showcased both Grandpa's grilling skills and his ability to elevate simple, locally sourced ingredients into something extraordinary, a true testament to traditional barbecue techniques and flavors that have become rare today. Number 8. Barbecue bolognia chubs. Barbecue bolognia chubs were a distinct, nostalgic favorite often found at Grandpa's BBQs, especially in the southern United States. The dish involves taking a whole bolognia chub, a large, cylindrical piece of processed meat, and transforming it into a smoky, savory delight. To prepare this, Grandpa would score the surface of the bologna with a knife in a crisscross pattern, allowing the smoke and seasoning to penetrate deeper into the meat. This scoring also helped to create those delicious, crispy edges that everyone loved. Before hitting the grill, the bolognia chub was generously slathered with a homemade barbecue rub, typically a mix of brown sugar, paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, and a hint of cayenne for a mild kick. The rub would caramelize as the bologna smoked slowly over indirect heat, usually on a smoker or a grill set up for slow cooking, which allowed the fat to render and the exterior to develop a flavorful bark. The result was a smoky, sweet, and slightly spicy bologna that was often sliced thick and served on white bread with pickles and onions, making for an easy yet unforgettable sandwich. Barbecue bologna chubs were an economical yet flavorful way to feed a crowd, showcasing Grandpa's ability to elevate a simple, inexpensive ingredient into a centerpiece dish with his unique barbecue skills. Number 9. Beer can chicken. Beer can chicken became a popular backyard cooking technique in the late 20th century, especially beloved by those who enjoyed combining simple ingredients with creative grilling methods. To make beer can chicken, Grandpa would take a whole chicken and season it generously with a dry rub made of salt, pepper, paprika, garlic powder, and brown sugar. The secret was placing the chicken upright on an open can of beer, which acted as a stand and a source of moisture. The beer inside would simmer and steam as the chicken cooked, infusing the meat with a subtle flavor and keeping it moist and juicy. Grandpa often chose a beer with a strong flavor profile, like a dark ale or a spiced beer, to add more depth to the chicken. The chicken was then set on the grill over indirect heat, allowing it to cook slowly for about 1.5 to 2 hours. This slow cooking method ensured that the chicken's skin became crispy while the inside remained tender. The upright position allowed the fat to render out of the skin, creating a beautifully browned exterior. This method was not only effective in producing a succulent roast but also a conversation starter at any barbecue, demonstrating Grandpa's knack for turning ordinary cooking into a memorable culinary experience. Number 10. Pineapple upside-down ham on the grill. Pineapple upside-down ham on the grill was a favorite for those who loved the blend of sweet and savory flavors. This dish involved a unique grilling method where a ham slice, often thick-cut, was prepared with a sweet glaze made from brown sugar, honey, and a bit of mustard for tanginess. Before grilling, Grandpa would arrange pineapple rings and maraschino cherries on top of the ham, securing them with toothpicks to ensure they stayed in place during cooking. The grill was preheated to a medium-low heat, allowing the ham to cook slowly without burning the sugars in the glaze. As the ham cooked, the sugars would caramelize, creating a sticky, flavorful crust that paired perfectly with the smoky essence from the grill. The pineapple added a tropical sweetness that balanced the saltiness of the ham, while the cherries provided a burst of color and a hint of tartness. This method not only amplified the ham's natural flavors but also introduced a caramelized, almost candy texture to the pineapple and cherries. The result was a visually appealing and flavorful centerpiece, often served as the main dish at family gatherings. Grandpa's preparation and attention to grilling techniques made this dish a standout, turning a simple ham slice into a memorable barbecue delight. Number 11. Foil-wrapped baked apples. Foil-wrapped baked apples were a simple yet delicious dessert that Grandpa often made during BBQs, combining the ease of preparation with rich, comforting flavors. To prepare these, Grandpa would core fresh apples and stuff them with a mix of butter, brown sugar, cinnamon, and sometimes a handful of raisins or chopped nuts for added texture and flavor. Each apple was then tightly wrapped in aluminum foil to create a sealed packet, trapping in heat and steam. The foil packets were placed directly on hot coals or a cooler part of the grill, allowing the apples to bake slowly. As they cooked, the butter and sugar mixture melted, creating a syrup that seeped into the fruit, making it tender and infusing it with a warm, spiced aroma. The foil ensured the apples remained moist and prevented them from burning, while the grill's indirect heat added a subtle smoky note to the dish. After about 20 to 30 minutes, depending on the heat of the grill and the size of the apples, they were ready to be carefully unwrapped, revealing a soft, caramelized treat that was perfect on its own or served with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. The method of baking in foil was an easy way to prepare a dessert outdoors, requiring minimal ingredients but delivering maximum flavor, a true testament to Grandpa's knack for making something special out of simple ingredients. Number 12. Grilled liver and onions. Grilled liver and onions were a staple at many old-school BBQs, particularly for those who appreciated the unique, rich flavor of organ meats. Grandpa knew that liver could be a divisive dish, so he made sure to prepare it perfectly to convert even the skeptics. He often used calf liver, which is milder and more tender than beef liver, ensuring a more palatable taste and texture. The liver was first soaked in milk for an hour or two, which helped to mellow out its strong, metallic flavor and tenderize the meat. Before grilling, the liver slices were seasoned with salt, pepper, and sometimes a hint of garlic powder. They were then placed directly on a hot grill, cooking quickly to avoid becoming tough. Just a few minutes on each side until they were slightly charred on the outside but still soft on the inside. Meanwhile, the onions were grilled separately, often tossed in a bit of olive oil or butter to enhance their sweetness as they caramelized. Once both were cooked, the onions were piled on top of the liver, adding a sweet, tangy contrast to the rich, savory flavor of the meat. This dish was not only economical but also nutritious, packed with iron and vitamins. Grilled liver and onions showcased Grandpa's skill in balancing strong flavors, making a challenging ingredient accessible and delicious to everyone at the barbecue. Number 13. Blackened catfish. Blackened catfish was a popular dish that combined the bold flavors of Cajun seasoning with the natural, mild taste of freshwater catfish. Grandpa would start by coating the catfish fillets in a thick layer of spices, typically including paprika, cayenne pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, thyme, oregano, and black pepper. The seasoning mix was pressed firmly onto the fish to ensure it adhered well, creating a crust that would blacken and caramelize during cooking to achieve the characteristic blackened effect. Grandpa would use a cast iron skillet heated to a very high temperature, often on a grill or over an open flame. A small amount of butter or oil would be added to the skillet, immediately creating a sizzle that signaled it was hot enough. The catfish fillets were then placed in the pan, where the high heat would quickly char the spices, forming a flavorful, crispy crust on the outside while keeping the inside tender and juicy. This method of cooking not only sealed in the moisture but also intensified the flavors, making the dish a hit for its combination of smoky, spicy, and slightly tangy tastes. The blackened catfish was typically served with simple sides like coleslaw or cornbread to balance its robust flavor, showcasing Grandpa's mastery of transforming simple ingredients into a dish full of character. Number 14. Barbecue pineapple and maraschino cherry kebabs. Barbecue pineapple and maraschino cherry kebabs were a nostalgic favorite, especially at summertime family gatherings. These kebabs were a delightful combination of sweet and tangy flavors that added a vibrant and colorful touch to any barbecue spread. To make these, Grandpa would cut fresh pineapple into large chunks, ensuring they were big enough to hold up on the skewer without falling apart during grilling. The pineapple was often chosen for its juicy, slightly acidic nature, which caramelized beautifully on the grill, enhancing its natural sugars and creating a perfect balance between sweetness and tartness. Grandpa then threaded the pineapple pieces onto skewers, alternating with bright red maraschino cherries. The cherries, preserved in a sweet syrup, added a burst of color and a unique, slightly almond-like flavor that complemented the grilled pineapple well. Before placing them on the grill, Grandpa might lightly brush the kebabs with a mixture of melted butter and brown sugar or a honey glaze, which helped to create a sticky, caramelized coating as they cooked. Grilling over medium heat allowed the pineapples to char slightly, giving them a smoky flavor while the cherries softened and released their sweetness. These kebabs were often served as a side dish or a fun, fruity dessert, appealing to both adults and children alike, making them a memorable part of Grandpa's barbecue traditions. Number 15. Grilled clams casino. Grilled clams casino was a standout dish at many of Grandpa's BBQs, combining the flavors of fresh seafood with savory toppings to create a truly memorable appetizer. The preparation began with fresh clams, typically littleneck or cherrystone, which were scrubbed clean and placed directly on the grill over medium heat until they just started to open. As the clams opened, the natural brine was retained inside, providing a base of salty, oceanic flavor that paired perfectly with the toppings. Grandpa prepared a mixture of breadcrumbs, finely chopped bell peppers, crispy bacon bits, garlic, and fresh parsley, all bound together with melted butter. This mixture was carefully spooned onto each opened clam, ensuring the topping was generously heaped without spilling over. The clams were then returned to the grill, allowing the topping to crisp up and the breadcrumbs to toast slightly. The bacon added a smoky, salty crunch, while the garlic and bell peppers offered a subtle sweetness and aromatic punch. As the breadcrumbs browned, they absorbed the juices from the clams, bacon, and butter, creating a rich, cohesive bite with a perfect balance of textures and flavors. These grilled clams casino were often served hot, straight from the grill, making them an impressive, crowd-pleasing start to any barbecue, showcasing Grandpa's skill in enhancing simple ingredients with bold, complementary flavors. Number 16. Barbecue chicken pizza on the grill. Barbecue chicken pizza on the grill was an inventive dish that brought together the best of backyard cooking and classic pizza flavors. Grandpa would start by preparing the dough from scratch or using a pre-made one, ensuring it was slightly thicker to withstand the heat of the grill without tearing. He would roll the dough out to a manageable size and brush it lightly with olive oil to prevent sticking. The grill was preheated to medium-high, allowing for a perfect char on the crust without burning it. Once the dough was ready, Grandpa would lay it directly on the grill grates. The heat would create beautiful grill marks and a crispy exterior while keeping the inside soft and chewy. After flipping the dough to cook the other side, he would spread a generous layer of tangy barbecue sauce over it. The sauce was typically a blend of tomato base, molasses, vinegar, and spices, providing a sweet and smoky flavor profile. Grilled, shredded chicken, usually leftovers from a previous barbecue, was then scattered across the pizza, along with red onions, mozzarella cheese, and a sprinkle of cilantro or parsley for freshness. The pizza was then covered with a lid or foil to melt the cheese evenly, creating a gooey, melty topping. The result was a smoky, crispy, and flavorful barbecue chicken pizza that combined the essence of traditional barbecue with the beloved comfort of pizza, making it a standout dish that always impressed at family gatherings. Number 17. Pit roasted pigs. Pit roasted pigs were a grand spectacle at traditional gatherings, where the process of cooking the pig was as much about community as it was about flavor. This method involved digging a large pit in the ground, often lined with stones or bricks to retain heat. Grandpa would prepare the whole pig by marinating it in a blend of spices, salt, and sometimes fruit juices to tenderize the meat and infuse it with flavor. The pig was then wrapped in banana leaves or burlap, which helped to keep the meat moist and prevent it from burning. Hot coals or wood were placed at the bottom of the pit, creating a slow, even heat. The wrapped pig was lowered into the pit and covered with more hot coals, then sealed with a layer of soil to trap the heat and smoke. This slow roasting method could take anywhere from 12 to 24 hours, depending on the size of the pig. The result was incredibly tender, succulent meat that fell off the bone, with a deep, smoky flavor that modern ovens and grills can't replicate. The process required patience and skill, but the payoff was a richly flavored feast that brought people together, turning the act of cooking into a day-long social event. Number 18. Smokehouse turkey legs. Smokehouse turkey legs were a beloved staple at many family gatherings, showcasing a rich, smoky flavor that could only be achieved through hours of careful preparation. Grandpa would start by brining the turkey legs in a solution of salt, sugar, and spices like bay leaves, peppercorns, and garlic. This brining process not only helped to keep the meat moist during the long smoking process but also infused it with deep flavors from within. Once brined, the turkey legs were thoroughly dried and rubbed with a mixture of spices, which could include paprika, black pepper, onion powder, and a touch of cayenne for heat. The legs were then placed in a smokehouse, where hardwoods like hickory, applewood, or oak were used to create a slow, consistent smoke. This method allowed the legs to cook slowly, absorbing the smoky aromas over several hours, typically anywhere from 4 to 6 hours depending on the size of the turkey legs and the temperature of the smokehouse. The result was meat that was tender, with a slightly crispy skin that had absorbed the smoke, giving it a robust, hearty flavor. These turkey legs were often served with simple sides, as their rich flavor profile stood on its own, making them a centerpiece of any barbecue spread. Number 19. Burnt ends from beef fat trimmings. Burnt ends from beef fat trimmings were a delicious and resourceful creation that turned otherwise discarded parts of the meat into a prized barbecue delicacy. Grandpa would collect the fatty trimmings from various beef cuts, particularly those rich in connective tissue, like brisket or chuck. These trimmings, often discarded by butchers, were transformed into something special through a slow smoking process. The key was in the long, slow cooking that allowed the fat to render and the meat to absorb the smoky flavors, making each piece tender on the inside with a crispy, caramelized exterior. To prepare, the trimmings were generously seasoned with a dry rub of salt, pepper, brown sugar, and spices like smoked paprika and cayenne pepper. The pieces were then placed in a smoker over indirect heat, where they smoked for several hours until they developed a dark, flavorful bark. During this time, the brown sugar in the rub would caramelize, creating a sweet and smoky crust that contrasted perfectly with the rich, juicy interior. Occasionally, the trimmings were basted with a tangy barbecue sauce towards the end of the cooking process, adding an extra layer of flavor and ensuring that every bite was both crispy and succulent. Burnt ends from beef fat trimmings exemplified Grandpa's ability to turn simple, overlooked ingredients into a flavorful barbecue masterpiece that was cherished by all. Number 20. Barbecue frog legs. Barbecue frog legs were a unique dish that Grandpa prepared, bringing a touch of Southern tradition and a bit of adventurous spirit to the barbecue. Frog legs, known for their delicate, mild flavor similar to chicken, were a great canvas for bold seasoning and smoky grilling. Grandpa would start by soaking the frog legs in buttermilk for a few hours. This marinade not only tenderized the meat but also helped the seasoning adhere better. The buttermilk soak also reduced any gamey taste, making the frog legs more palatable for those trying them for the first time. After marinating, the legs were seasoned with a blend of Cajun spices, paprika, cayenne, garlic powder, and a touch of oregano, to bring out a robust flavor profile. They were then placed on a hot grill, where the direct heat quickly seared the outside, creating a crispy, slightly charred crust while keeping the inside juicy and tender. Occasionally, Grandpa would brush the frog legs with a homemade barbecue sauce made from a mix of tomato paste, brown sugar, vinegar, and a hint of mustard, which caramelized beautifully over the high heat, adding a sweet and tangy glaze. Served hot off the grill, barbecue frog legs were often a surprise hit, showcasing a blend of crispy texture, smoky flavor, and the subtle taste of the frog meat that was both exotic and comforting, reminding everyone of Grandpa's flair for turning simple ingredients into something extraordinary.